Welcome back, Life Sciences. We are on the flower journey. Today we're looking at the structure of the flower and how it relates to how a plant reproduces sexually. And we ended off the last section looking at this concept of pollination, right, where we transfer pollen from the male, because that's what sexual reproduction, we need a male, and pollen is the sex cell, to the female stigma, and that's where we're hoping that fertilization is going to occur. All right, so guys, in this segment, what we're going to look at, a few more words that you're going to need to, all right, understand, that are going to come into the play, as I said to you before. Take a note of them, listen to how I might describe them, and if you're still uncertain, go and look it up, use your textbook or use the notes. Now, what we're going to look at now is we're going to carry on with this concept of pollination. And flowers and insects, any kind of animal that's going to pollinate, they have this relationship, right? Flowers need the pollinators and pollinators need the flowers. It's basically what they call co-evolution, right? They evolve together. They need each other. And what we're going to concentrate on now is that flowers can have special features, or maybe you can look at a flower and you can sometimes say, I think I know what the pollinator could be just by looking at the structure of the flower. Now, there are three ways in which, right, well, there's actually more than that, right? There are three ways generally which we look at pollination. One, by insects, they're generally the larger one. Then we're going to look how birds, all right, what characteristics flowers will have, birds pollinated, and then some flowers don't need any kind of animal, and they're going to be wind pollinated, and they might have a different structure as well. Guys, there are lots of different varieties of mice and little rats and desert animals that also pollinate, but we're just looking at the three groups that play a larger role in pollination. Okay, so let's take a look at what a flower, what characteristic a flower will have if it's an insect pollinated flower. Okay, so if you have a look, I've really tried to put in big diagrams to show you these concepts. Now, as we said before, they need to have advertisements. So you're going to find that the flowers are going to be usually really large. You can see it. Look, here's the yellow, here's the purple. They're big, you can see them clearly, right? And so can the insects. They're also going to see these beautiful colors. Now, what the insect needs, I'm going to jump one point. The insect, a flower produces nectar. Nice, sweet, it's a reward, all right? So you come to me, and I will reward you. But also, other than the color, what I can do, what I can attract you with, is I can give off a nice smell. So I look good, I smell good, and I'm going to give you a reward. What a bargain, what a bargain. The insects are going to say, I need to do that. Now remember what we want them to do. Just think, pollination, we need to get the pollen to the female. All right, keep that in the back of your mind. That is why we need them. Okay, so what happens is, here's my flower, and inside the flower are the male and the female parts. So what do I want I've got the picture of the bee. I want him to go inside the flower. And when he goes inside, what is he going to do? He's going to brush across the pollen. And what's the pollen going to do? We're going to see this now. It's going to stick to him. Or if he's got pollen all over him, he's going to come into the flower, and here's the female, and the pollen's going to be left behind. What is he making? A withdrawal or a deposit? Right? It's like a bank. Am I taking something away, or am I leaving something behind? And flowers are also quite clever. Have a look at these nectar guides. Guys, look at these lines. What are they saying? Hey, insects, look at this. This is where you need to come, All right, so it's actually showing them where the beautiful reward is going to be. So you see how flowers have developed all these characteristics to help their pollinators on the way. Guys, so have a look here. Look at this bee. He's covered in pollen. And the pollen is going to be nice and sticky, right? If it wasn't sticky, it wouldn't stick to the bee. Because I want it to stick on the bee, because I want him to fly away, go to another flower, and let it stick on there. And also, we can't have small amounts of pollen. We've got to have lots, because we've got to guarantee that this bee, right, is going to go to a flower, and that pollination, right, that transfer to the female is going to occur. All right, so there we're looking at how flowers are adapted to insect pollination. Now, it doesn't mean that birds can't pollinate those as well. We're just looking at general features that you could find, right, special features that are adaptations to those pollinators. Now, let's have a look at birds. Now, remember, I want you to think birds have beaks, right, and the beaks can be quite sharp. So you need to think along those lines. Right, first of all, let's have a look here. Guys, generally speaking, the flowers are red or orange. Birds tend to find the reds and the orange more of an advertisement than the other ones. It doesn't mean that they don't, but the red and the orange tend to be a favorite for the birds. Also, these flowers must be open during the day. Insects can be busy at night, so their flowers can also open at night. But birds tend to be, all right, diurnal. That means they are active during the day. So the flowers generally need to be open. Okay, now two quite important things. The flowers are usually tubes. Can you see that? They're long and thin. Can you see these tubes? And that fits perfectly for the beak. Right? The beak is going to fit into there. They're going to come get the reward, but they're nice and thin, and the beak can fit in there nicely. But the flowers must be sturdy. What do we mean by sturdy? Sturdy means strong. You've got this bird hovering, and it needs to get its beak into the flower. If the flower wasn't strong and sturdy, right, it would flop over, and the bird would never be able to get to it. So you want a flower that's strong. It's usually upright. So as you can see, the hovering, when the bird hovers, the beak can fit in nice and easily. Now, guys, the nectar needs to be dilute. What do we mean by that? The bird needs to drink. So you'll see there's lots of, what does dilute mean? It's a nice word of saying liquid. You can actually often make nectar for some birds, and they can come and they can drink it. So the nectar reward the birds need to drink. A little bit difficult, all right, it's different from the insects. Now, what happens is there's no scent on these flowers. Birds generally have a very poor sense of smell. So flowers that are mostly bird pollinated are not going to have a smell, because it's a waste to have a smell if your pollinators, right, are not going to use it. Also a concept here, the flowers need to protect themselves. This is not a concept you need to know, but just have a look here. Some plants, the ovaries at the top, they call it a superior ovary. Some plants, the ovary is deep into the plant. And this would be a good thing if you're a bird pollinator. Why? Because that beak, if that beak comes in and it goes into the flower, it could damage the ovary, and that damages the ovules. All right. So the deeper in the plant you have the ovary, the less the bird is able to get to it. It would be a bit of a waste if the bird was destroying one of the reproductive structures, because then pollination would not be able to carry on. Okay, guys, so here what we have is that the pollen grains form clumps. So yes, they're sticky, but not to the same extent as, the bees, etc. You want it to be able to stick maybe to their beaks and maybe to their wings, right? You still want to have that concept of being able to stick. But generally, unlike the bees and lots of the insects, very seldom they're going to be covered, right? Because they don't put their whole body in, just the beak. So that's kind of thing you're looking for, clumps of, right, the pollen. So guys, when it comes to birds and when it comes to insects, they're more preferable because they take out they're going to be far more efficient, because a bird or an insect is going to go from flower to flower. So there's more of a guarantee that pollination is going to occur. Because what will happen? The bird or the insect, whatever the pollinator is going to keep on visiting. Now that brings into, all right, our next pollinator. I can't call it a pollinator because it's not an animal, but the next means is the wind. Now when we look at wind pollination is wasteful. And what do we mean by that? Well, the wind blows, so there's no guarantee, like in the pollinators, that we're going to get that concept. So here, there's no guarantee, and we have to produce a lot and lots of pollen, hoping that when the wind blows, it is going to find its destination. But on the other hand, wind-pollinated flowers can save on other things. How can they save? Let's have a look here. Look at their flowers. Right, their flowers actually don't have to be really big. They need to be small, and they're usually white. Have a look at the ones here. Believe it or not, guys, this is grass. I don't know if you've ever seen the tops of grass at times. This is a flower on grass. Right, you would never think it's a flower because it's so dull. But you'll notice, and it's usually above the ground. Because what do they need? Flowers need the wind. Wind doesn't happen low. Wind happens high up. Okay, so you've got these flowers that are high up. They're small. They're white. No, the birds aren't interested in them. All right, they don't have to advertise. And because we don't have any pollinators, why waste our energy on having a special smell or giving them some kind of reward? So there's no scent or nectar. But what do they have? And this is quite important. So guys, the male anthers, look at these. They hang outside. Right, and if they hang outside, when the wind blows, they will blow. And what do they release? All their pollen. Okay, how's that? So one of the concepts, if you're given a picture, if the male anthers are hanging outside, you don't see any flowers anywhere really, then you can identify it as a wind-pollinated flowers. What about the female? Check here with the female. These are her stigmas. Look how nice and feathery they are. They are nice and feathery. The reason being, all right, they're long. Because why must they be feathery? They must be waiting for the wind. If they're hidden, the pollen's not going to find it. Remember, there's no pollinators. The wind is going to then bring in and going to find these nice, sticky, feathery. All right, we say they're long and feathery. And they're also quite sticky for the pollen to be able to attach to it. Guys, the pollen itself, it can't be sticky. Right, because if it sticks, then it's not, the wind's not going to carry it. Have a look here. I know I've got a pine pollen, and a pine is not an angiosperm. But I just wanted to show you the concept that it's got air sacs, that the pollen could have the thing over here, air sacs. And what do the air sacs do? They make it nice and light. And it's much easier for the wind to then transport for the pollen rather than it was sticky and it's stuck together. Okay, now pollen has arrived onto the stigma. Now we need to get the male gamete that's in there all the way down to the female. That is a process called fertilization. Okay, now you need to know these, right? It's an important term that you need to know. Guys, fertilization is when we combine or we fuse. All right, you can use either words. The male gamete, which is pollen, with the female gamete. Right, that is important. When that fusion occurs, that cell is called a zygote. I want to show you this diagram over here. It's quite intricate how it happens. The pollen you don't need to know the whole process. The pollen lands on the stigma. Now guys, can you see this? This is a pollen tube. It needs to grow a tube because what's it carrying? It's carrying a male cell, and I'm going to use over here. So what happens, here's the female. The male is over here, and we want the male and the female to join. Right, and they do that. So when the female joins with the male, we have a concept called a zygote. That zygote is now going to develop, right, into a concept, and this is quite important. Guys, when the ovules over here, when they fuse, the zygote is what we know as a seed. Listen carefully. The ovule and the male gametes, right, make a structure called a zygote, which develops into the seed. The ovary, people, is fruit. So when you are eating fruit, it's the ovary of the plant. It's enclosed, and what is inside the fruit, it's a seed. Remember, sexual reproduction gives rise to a seed. A seed has got a hard coat, all right? It can lie dormant for many years, and when a seed germinates, what will it grow into? A new plant. Okay, sexual reproduction, the end result, very important, is the seed. Why do we have fruit? Animals eat it. They eat the seed. They go away. What drops out of their feces? The seed. It germinates. All right? So that is a huge big bonus. It's protected, and it doesn't need to grow immediately. It can wait for a while. Right, so guys, what are seeds? Have a look. They're food. Food. Let's go back to biochemistry. Carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Food. Carbohydrates, our wheats, our millies. All right, our proteins, our legumes, our peanuts. All right, our lipids, also oils, all of those. Our food, our staple diet. Carbohydrates form, for some countries, a staple diet. Most of the people eat them because it's cheap and freely available. Mielie meal, right? Mielie meal. Where does it come from? It is a crop. It's planted by seeds from sexual reproduction, right? So when it comes to the plants, as I said to you, spices that we use on our food, cumin, parsley, turmeric, right? Saffron, ginger, right? What are all of them? They are all food, right? So what we eat, and sometimes the things we put on our food, right? They all come from seeds. Seeds are food. Food is what keeps us going, right? What do farmers need to grow? Food. What do countries need? Food security, right? The people need to eat, and that is where plants come into play. Guys, not only, all right, are they food, your clothes are made of plants. Most of your medicine is plant-based. Houses, maybe you use wood. All right, what do you use wood for? Wood is from plants we can use to build. Maybe you want to use alternate energy sources, biofuel, plants. And maybe we just like to have a pretty bouquet of flowers in our house. All right, plants. But ultimately, it's all about the seed that has this potential to grow into the plants that supply us with this. Now, an important concept that you need to understand is a seed bank. And literally, a seed bank is exactly the same as a money bank. What it is a place where seeds are stored, all right? Where seeds are stored. We store them, all right, to keep a history of, all right, of all the different plants, be it wild, all right, or be anything that we have cultivated or grown, even genetically engineered. We need to keep a seed bank. Guys, there are two of them, All right, and you need to know about the two. There's one in Sweden, it's the Svalbard Islands. You can see it's nice and cold. And this is what it looks like. It really needs to be cold, guys, because the cold keeps the seeds from germinating. Right here in the UK, they have the Q Millennium Seed Bank, right, where they also have this conservation project going. South Africa is involved in this as well, where we conserve seeds, conserve varieties of seeds. And as I said, a seed bank, really important to keep biodiversity. Yeah, guys, seed banks are really important because basically what they're going to do, all right, is they're going to keep this biodiversity. They're going to make sure that then things are lost. In other words, if our ecosystems are damaged, right, by global change, when I say alien invasion, as I said, my kids often think it's about little green men. No, alien plants that don't belong in a particular place, and they take over. We need to get rid of them and reintroduce, all right, our own endemic and indigenous plants. When habitats are lost, right, for example, the Amazon forest being cut down, we need to replace those that we lost. And where do we get it from? The seeds that we store. We also need to practice on seeds. We need to bioengineering. Can we maybe come up with a way that plants are resistant to climate change, or they're resistant to drought, so that we can, all right, plant plants in areas where it's dry or where they don't usually belong, but then people can still have food. As I say to you, right, pharmacies, when it comes to medicine, a lot of our medicinal, all right, all the things that we use originally come from plants. So seed banks are really, really important. You need to understand that concept. See? Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.